Welcome back for another video. I'm Ehabad, a free-to-play endgame player in Raid Shadow Legends. Today we have a special guest on the show, our first guest ever, in fact, on this channel, and it's none other than NubKex, or NubRaids, or just Nubs. He is a man of many names, but no face.
No face, no, and it's actually, believe it or not, it's the second time we're recording this video because the first time I also had no voice.
Exactly. Quite right. Technical mishaps, also called incompetence. I mean, who knows?
I'm lacking in many important qualities. It has been said before, but hopefully today is all right.
Thankfully, raid expertise is not one of them, so we'll be diving in together today to look at some roster analysis for a player who submitted his roster looking to progress from Silver 4 into Gold 1 for Tag Team Arena in that ever important Ramantu mission quest. So hopefully we can give him a hand today. Anyway, introduce yourself. I'm sure everyone on this channel, other than maybe 3 people, has seen your channel. It's a little bit bigger than mine, but anyway.
I mean, you're getting there, man. You're absolutely getting there. But yeah, I mean, I just do videos and all sorts of raid stuff. I do have my face in most of them, actually, so it's a different experience over there. Yeah, I'd like to do all different sorts of bits, champion guides, do a lot of Hydra stuff, the odd dabble in Arena. So, I mean, it was really fun. If you guys want to go and check out the video that we did over on my channel, myself and Ehabad, we did earlier game players. So we thought that this would be kind of a good tandem, would be to do one set on like earlier game players where it's a really limited roster. And then today, I think the player's named Darky. Looking at like a more advanced roster where, okay, the options are starting to open up, but then at the same time, you know, going into Gold 1 and Tag, your opponents are, they're getting quite a lot better as well. Like you think that Bronze or Silver are bad in Tag, just wait until you're trying to get up into Gold. It gets pretty brutal. It's a war out there.
100%, and Silver 4 is probably one of the most competitive tiers there is in Tag Team because so many people are trying to do that mission to get to Gold 1. And, you know, I think once you even push through Gold 1, actually Gold 2 and 3 are quite relaxed, relatively speaking, and then it gets a bit hectic again in Gold 4. So, yeah, definitely that kind of transition between Silver 4 and Gold 1, fiercely competitive, and it definitely does take time and effort and patience. I think that's a big thing that most raid players are aware of, is that the game is a testament of patience many times, particularly with Hydra and Tag Team. I think you've got to always have inexhaustible patience if you want to do well there.
Pretty much, yeah. Shall we dive into this roster then and see what?
100%. So the first thing we did is kind of following on from the video I made about roster analysis, and we've broken down the roster, picking out the champions that we think are going to fill certain roles, and we've picked from nukers, cleansers, strippers, control, support, and protection. And I'll through the magics of post-processing editing, I'll flash that up in the screen now, but we've got a copy of that we'll refer to. And I'll just run it through very quickly. In terms of the nukers, we've picked out Gaius, Herndig, Ignatius, and Ragash. In terms of cleansers, we've only got Mithrala. We are a little bit light there. That is something that I'd probably recommend this player have a look through his vault. Maybe there's a Sky Touched in there. Maybe there's a Scathix, you know, something that we could use if you do happen to have to face against multiple Torment or Hegemon teams. In terms of strippers, we've got Kaimar, Mighty Uko, and Rian, so we're quite well placed there. In terms of control, we've got some really nice control champions. We've got both Kaima and Hegemon, top tier control champions there. Lissandra, Countess Lix, and even a bit of a niche one in Gamuran. And then supports, again, we've got really top tier support there in Duchess. We've got the Arbiter, Uko again, Lydia, and a bit of an outside tip that we've put in here into Tura. And then from protection, again, 2 fantastic champions. My most wanted in Necrit and everyone's people's protection champion in Ultimate Death Knight.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid roster across the board. I know that when he submitted his roster, he was saying his biggest problem was finding nukers, but we'll see what sort of teams we can build with these nukers. Like he's got a couple of defensive ones in there. The attack nukers are more limited. Yeah, I thought definitely cleansing is that really stands out as being a lack, but there are definitely ways around it as well.
Definitely. So do you want to start off by running through what you thought of, or we both thought of as the first team, the kind of classic arena cleave speed team.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with nearly all the accounts we've been looking at, building that speed team is, everyone's got the Arbiter, and we've got some insane champions to put with her here. We both came up with basically the same team as well. They're going with Arbiter, sticking her with a Hegemon. That's such a nasty combo, right? Because Hegemon going first, it becomes so difficult. Like, how do you can you cut in and beat her in the speed race? Well, not really. If Hegemon's in there, you need a special way to get past it. And then on top of that, Nekret and then Herndig being probably the best attack-based nuker there in the squad. So yeah, I think you put this stuff together, and I think especially Nekret and Hegemon are both champions that you need to really bring sort of specific counters to actually get past. And putting the two together is nasty. It's like there's the threat of Arbiter going first, so speed race is looking bad. You start to get locked out by the Hegemon. So bringing in a cleanser there, but if you're bringing in a cleanser to deal with Hegemon, you start to become more limited in terms of stripping off buffs and actually being able to nuke through the Nekret protection onto your attack nuker. Herndig, some affinity issues because he's blue, but he does actually hit really hard, and he does have 2 AoE attacks as well. So I think that actually works really well for a nuker in this style of team, where you don't have a Kymar that's going to reset. But yeah, what do you think about this sort of team?
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, we both came up with the exact same composition for that first team, kind of pairing as many synergies as we could. Herndig's probably his biggest weakness is that he doesn't have great survivability. He does not have a mechanic in his kit where he is able to take a hit, stay alive. He doesn't have the unkillable that Leoris has or Skullcrown has. He doesn't have the great passive that a Candrafon has. These kind of classic nukers that we look to put in our defense team. He's a bit lacking there. But with Nekrit protecting him, I think we mitigate a lot of his weaknesses, and then we can focus on his strengths. Like you said, he's got 2 AoEs. He does hit hard. He also has his extra turn if he kills an enemy on the A1, which means you have a bit of a way of getting around either a Basher or a Warlord, anyone who's going to put your skills on cooldown or put any kind of block cooldown skills on you. You have a way of cycling through those extra turns. Also, if he does have the kill, he gets the reset on one of his AoEs. So, there's a lot of utility that he's bringing there. And we do have a limited number of attack nuker options in terms of legendaries. But he's a strong one. And he doesn't have that kind of niche use that a Gaius does. I think Herndig is going to be more consistent. And when you're trying to transition up the ranks in tag team, consistency is so important. We need to be making sure we're winning at least 2 out of 3 on every time we're attacking, and making it as difficult as possible for people attacking us, where they're not going to be necessarily quite sure how we're geared and how we're set up to defend. I think if you have a Gaius, it's kind of one-dimensional and people know exactly what they're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say as well, like, I wouldn't be putting a bomb champion in with a Nekret, really, because Nekret's bringing you protection. But with a bomb champion, because they're doing most of their damage with bombs, I mean, you can often just put them in Stone Skin, right? They don't need Savage to hit hard. So it's kind of a waste to waste that protection. Whereas the bomb champion, they typically really, really want increased accuracy to land the bombs, and then a buff stripper to make sure they can actually get the bombs on. So you don't really have enough slots in there to fit Nekret in with the bombs that easily. And certainly when we've got so few nukers to choose from here, I think that Herndig has got to be pretty much the go-to with the Nekret.
100%, I 100% agree. And I think in terms of the gearing, it becomes quite self-explanatory as well that, Herndig should be in Savage here. He doesn't need a kind of extra protection set like Swift Parry or Stone Skin. We're really going to rely on that Nekrit to protect him and make sure that Herndig can do as much damage as possible, particularly given we don't have a drop defense champion in this team. Obviously, Herndig can drop defense, but we're not going to build him with super high accuracy. So it's unlikely we're going to be landing any of those debuffs on kind of the higher resistance supports that we are going to be facing. So it is very important that he's going to be in that Savage to get as much damage as possible. And then obviously we've got Hedgie, who I think probably in this instance should be a crowd control Hedgie, but you could make an argument to run a nuke Hedgie if you don't have enough damage from the Herndig. So that's something you probably would have to find out through play testing. But I think that the initial starting point would be to have Hedgie either in stun or taunting and try and really disrupt the enemy team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely the weakness of Hedgie compared to, let's say, a year ago is that you do have things like the Stone Skin coming in. There's more, cleanser champions like the Mithrala, but I do think it's still probably worth running him just full CC. I think that is the way to go. And it's a nasty combo as well there with the Necret, right? The Necret ally attack, if he gets a shield up on Hedgie and starts bringing him in, that's throwing out a couple of random hit A1s, which can throw out some stuns or taunts as well, provokes. That gets really nasty if you don't take them down quickly, which is, well, with a Necret, it's pretty hard to take them down quickly. So, yeah, there's some nice combos there.
Completely. And the other beauty of the hegemon here is that even on offense, if you're not confident you're going to win the speed race, you can still place this team against an enemy speed team and just use A1 on Hedgie, get that
Oh, yeah.
push back, get the evil eye hit, and you should therefore win the speed race as a consequence. And generally speaking, that's something that I find myself in tag team. I never expect to win the speed race, and I can never put a speed team against a speed team because I just don't have the highest speed gear, particularly in Gold 4 tag team where everyone
I have
else
the same problem. Probably everyone watching this is going to have the same problem. Like when there's guys in there that have been playing for 3+ years, it's like, how do you have gear that's as fast as theirs? Either you are so super lucky, or I tend to just be like, I could just try Stone Skin here. That's my strategy because I do a lot of Hydra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just generally assume that I'm going to be slower. I don't even
Mm.
I don't even try to find out. There's very little point. And I think
True.
that's another thing that maybe people when they're trying to progress through tag team, maybe they don't do that enough. And that's typically it's more consistent if you don't put your speed team against the other person's speed team. You should
Oh, yeah.
build a kind of go second team that's going to counter the speed team, and then use your speed team against one that looks like it's going to be susceptible to your setup. If you're relying on going speed versus speed, it's a flip of a coin, and it's probably not an equally weighted one. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this guy, he can get away with it, Darky, because he's got the Hedgie, so he's sort of the exception to the rule. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, for me, I can confirm 100%. My speed team, that's just used to, go in with like someone like Ramantu when you get him, or a good CC champion, lock down the enemy, and yeah, just get ahead of them and they can't recover. But yeah, speed versus speed, you have to be so fast, you have to be so confident to win. So yeah, probably not what most viewers are going to be doing.
Indeed, but that's kind of the point, I guess, of analyzing the roster first is you look where your strengths are and you look where your synergies are. So we've got that team one. I think we've got that locked down. We're quite happy with the way it works both on offense and on defense. It's a flexible team. When you are on offense, you do have the option to switch up the nuker, particularly. You do have that Gaius if it looks like it's an enemy that Gaius would suit better than Herndig, but I don't think there are going to be many of those. And if you do pull another attack-based nuke in the future, that is a swap that could be made. Herndig could be improved in that composition with, say, a Hefrak or Leoris or a Baron. There are clear paths to improve that team and work with it. And then in terms of a second team, the kind of thought process that I had, we've got a S-tier support in Duchess, so it makes sense to go with the Duchess team. And the pairing of Duchess and Mithrala is so strong. You get the strength and you get Duchess's passive. You have the cleanse for Mithrala. They're extremely tanky and hard to kill as a duo. And then to kind of pair off that, because we are limited on the attack-based nukers, my thinking was to go with Ragash. You have both Mithrala, who can bring the increased defense, but also Ragash on his A1 if he does get a counter attack in, because it kind of is a go second team. So when the enemy hits us, if we do get that counter attack via the masteries in from the initial hit, Ragash will also self buff himself. So there's two ways of Ragash getting the increased defense that we're probably going to need to do decent damage. And then in the fourth spot, we actually, when we first did the recording of this video, we actually had Ultimate Death Knight there as a protection champion to make sure that Ragash had a higher chance of staying alive, and also to kind of make this team more and more annoying. Having re-looked at it, I actually think Rian would be better in that slot, because that gives us a buffed strip and a bit of redundancy on the revive. If Duchess does die, Rian can pick Duchess back up. You also have that buff strip, and you do have the weaken to help ensure that Ragash does get that kill. What are your thoughts on that team?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's you've got that really solid core of the Duchess Mithrala. Nobody wants to fight against that. That's just so nasty. Yeah, I thought that your call out, it was you that spotted the Ragash, and I hadn't really thought about that counterattack A1 potential to self buff with increased defense. You made the point as well. I think that Mithrala's AI is actually quite smart. So you can just leave her to work by default, and if there's enough debuffs out, she'll cleanse. Otherwise, she'll open with the increased defense on the AoE Hex move. So that would actually set up Ragash to go in and nuke. So
Yeah,
that's quite
yeah,
intriguing. Yeah,
100%. And generally speaking, like when you're on offense, you always have the ability to make the decision and ensure
yeah,
that kind of the susceptibility of the AI isn't a problem. But on defense, you have those kind of two options. You either force the cleanse and know that you'll have that cleanse going off first, no matter how many debuffs are out. But her AI is reasonable, and I don't know the exact number of threshold, but I have witnessed or kind of observed as I've tried to kind of get a gauge of it. But it looks like if you have, say, two of your champions debuffed, she will prioritize the cleanse. It seems to be about that. Otherwise, she'll open with the A2.
yeah,
You have the pros and cons on defense, whether you set the Mithrala AI. It's something to think
yeah.
about, and it's something I've changed. I've had it as priority to cleanse, and I've also had it as opener only, and I've also had it as just full auto. And I'm not sure which is absolutely the best, but there's definitely an
Hmm.
argument to be had for it.
Yeah, I'm in the process of testing it. I'm testing out my default AI Mithrala now since you said it yesterday. So I'll see how it goes over the weekend reset. Does it work better or not? So we'll find out. But yeah, actually, to build on a point that you were saying there in terms of putting out like the Hex at Mithrala as well, that's the nice thing about having Rian in the team. Or I guess you could, we're going to talk about Uko and probably in team three, Uko could go in either. I feel like Uko in a lot of ways is sort of like a legendary Rian where they've got very similar moves, but Uko is the longer cooldowns. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing, though, for Arena, where you might only get the one or two moves. But just the buff strip, it opens the enemy team up to that hex from Mithrala, which is so nasty. That's so nasty because it's going to lock down your team. It messes it up. It's just something again you don't want to have to deal with when you're attacking an arena defense because you can go in with a plan and the hex just if you get petrified, it ruins that plan. And it also, of course, opens them up to Ragash, who does bring a couple of real nice debuffs there with the decreased defense and the stun. He's probably going to be built with high damage. He's not going to have much accuracy, but you most likely they're going to have a damage dealer that's very similar that is going to be susceptible to that stun, and again, that can really start to mess up their team. So yeah, I think it's a nice team.
Yeah, 100%. That is a point worth making. I'd say champions like Herndig and Ragash and Leorius, it's worth building them with just enough accuracy that you're likely to land those debuffs on
Mm.
the champions that haven't got any resistance in their build. So I typically say on a Leorius or an Arena Herndig would build around 200 to 225 accuracy as a baseline, just so you do have the ability to get those debuffs, and you can use them in PvE. So it gives you that little bit of a hybrid kind of
Yeah.
utility that you can use them in wave clear, in dungeons, or in faction wars, etc. So you're continuing to land your debuffs in those kind of in most PvE scenarios, sort of really outside of Hard Doom Tower and Hydra. They're pretty much going to work everywhere else. And you're going to
Mm.
get those debuffs on those slightly squishier champions that are probably going to be the enemy's kind of control champions. They're nukers, but you won't land them on the supports or the cleansers. But it's usually
Hmm.
enough, like you say. And with Rian and Mithrala, the pair of having that buff strip and the hex. I mean, whenever I fight Mithrala teams, I'm always looking to bring block debuffs myself because I don't want to get disrupted by Mithrala and the hex and the petrification. And if the team
Yeah, yeah.
does have a buff stripper, so you've got yet another thing to consider, and it makes it more difficult to come up with a composition to counter that
Yeah.
defense. So there's a lot of nice
Actually,
synergies.
yeah, I've got a question for you because I know that you have Duchess. I actually am not aware of what the answer to this is. But in terms of like the lead for this team, you obviously your Duchess is that good safe lead with speed. I mean, does it mess up like the Duchess passive and stuff? Like if you put Mithrala in the lead, for example, like if you didn't need that speed aura, the accuracy aura for Mithrala obviously makes her tougher, but it's that boost to Rian and that boost to Ragash could be really nice against certain teams.
And
Have
it's
you
something
tried
you
that at
can
all?
decide about on offense, but from defense
Yeah.
perspective, you would want Duchess in the lead simply because Duchess's passive will only apply to the champions after her in the turn order. So it
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
apply to Mithrala if she was in lead. And
Interesting.
in terms of kind of having that tanky, solid core, you probably don't want to risk Mithrala dying unless you're running Mithrala and Stone Skin, etc. So it gets like really kind of
Hmm.
complicated and permutations based around your gearing. But as a starting point, I'd say just run Duchess in lead. You get the speed aura, which is always nice, and you know you're protecting everyone in your team.
Fair, fair. And in terms, let's actually mention the gear sets. I guess like my third, I actually don't know what you would run the Duchess in. Like bolster set could be nice, depending on how many reaction pieces you have, or maybe Stone Skin if you've no reaction, just to try to keep her alive at the start. I really like Mithrala in Stone Skin. I'm guessing you'd run Ragash probably in like Savage if possible, and then
Yeah, I
Rian.
mean,
I don't know.
there are a lot of choices here, and it very much would
Mm,
depend on the account and the gear at hand. I would say from Duchess perspective,
mm,
Swift Parry is still strong for Duchess. I still actually have both my Duchess in Swift Parry at the moment. I haven't transitioned. There is arguments to run her
interesting.
in a regen set. She's very strong in a regen set. Bolster if you had it. For me, what I would say first and foremost is gear your champions in the best gear you have. Now,
Yeah.
don't go and say, "Oh, I want to put her in Duchess. I want to put her in Stone Skin because that's like the optimum set for her." If you don't have good enough Stone Skin to make it work, if you're
Hmm.
sacrificing a lot of stats to get the optimum set, you're probably better off picking the second, third, or fourth best set in terms of that champion's gearing. But if you got the better versions of it, so like you said, bolster would work, regen would work, swift parry would work, stone skin would work, but it depends what gear
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
have. And in terms of Mithrala, yes, stone skin is optimum, but you can also use immunity or untouchable. I think it's
Mm.
paramount that you have that immunity mechanic in the first turn to ensure that you aren't being CC'd by any kind of gear sets or masteries or anything. Not masteries.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Blessings now with
Yeah,
the sheep
blessings,
one.
true.
So anything that ignores resistance, you don't want to get CC'd. You know, like a Siphi
Yeah.
A1.
Like, when I first got Mithrala, I didn't have actually any good gear in any of those, sets you mentioned, so I actually just had her in triple perception at the start. So that's a decent starting point, like, everyone is gonna have good perception gear, and Mithrala's so strong, you would put her in, like, your best gear. And it worked fine, but like you said, someone comes in with a stun set, a provoke set, or the blessings now, that's another threat, and you're gonna get debuffed with that stuff, which is it's not good. It's not good. I've had my Mithrala sheeped a few times already in arena, uh, because of that hex passive. Like it starts to trigger a lot of checks. That gets kind of nasty.
Yeah, snowballs, I guess, because it probably
Mm.
does the check when you do the hex. It does the check if it turns into a petrification. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a
I
high
think it
chance.
stops. Yeah, I think it stops the pet. I'm not sure if it stops the petrification or not, but it's yeah. I've just seen my Mithrala randomly pop into a sheep a few times. I mean, like, oh, okay, that sucks. But yeah.
And then, like you say, Ragash. I mean, ideally, we probably would go down the Savage route. But again, you could build him in Stone Skin. If you had a
Mm.
good damage dealing Stone Skin, you could build him Swift Parry. You could probably go. Is there anything else? Not really. I'd say
No, I'd say
those are
they're the
probably
big ones.
the only
Yeah.
three that you would go for. And it
Yeah.
depends on what you've got and what you've got at hand. But you just you do need to build him with good damage because we are relying on only really one damage dealer in each team. And
Hmm.
they're going to be having to face teams that are tanky themselves. So, you got to build as much damage as possible.
Yeah.
And then Rihanna actually is an interesting one because again, you could argue about going high accuracy and high speed, or you could go slower and have kind of the strip speed tuned to Ragash. So if you're going to build Ragash sort of around 190 to 200 ish speed, you could have
Hmm.
Rianne just a couple of speed faster. And there's an argument to have her in Stone Skin if you don't have great stone skin gear and you can't really get Duchess into it, and you can't really get Mithrala into it, actually Rian would be a viable option by having that lower speed requirement. You might be able to get like a decent accuracy level with 4-piece stone skin and 2-piece perception, and you still have that little bit of redundancy where you do have a revive, and you do know that she's not going to get CC'd realistically either, and make sure that you get the strip away before Ragash nukes.
Yeah, I quite like the stone skin Rian is nice, especially because it's more so, I suppose, if it becomes a really, really strong option when you're looking at more bomb teams, where then you've got Rian's strip is really good for bombs because the weekend ups their damage. But yeah, I mean, like the main reason, I guess, to run that slow stripper, it lets you crank their accuracy up higher, which is really good. And it also sort of makes sure that it gives the enemy team the chance to put up all their buffs before you strip them off. And it makes sure that the strip goes out like at the moment that you need it most, which is like right before your nuker is going to fire off their attack. So just remove all those buffs, put out that weaken, and make sure that Ragash has the best chance to kill them as possible. So I think if possible with the gear, yeah, I would try to speed tune them together. I think that would be quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll end up with a bit of a gap within the team, because you'll probably end up speed
Yeah.
tuning Mithrala to Duchess, so you ensure that you
Yeah.
get your cleanse off and then get Duchess's buffs up straight away. And then you'll have a
Yeah.
gap, and then you have your strip and your nuke from Ragash. Obviously, the
Mhm.
weakness there is that someone else could come in and strip you in between Duchess and Rian going. But like every team has some weaknesses, and ultimately you're just trying to have as stronger as a most solid team you can put together. And I think this is a really good starting point. In again, through playtesting, you'll get a better understanding of what works and what doesn't. And there are options to switch around. Basically, that Rian is a bit of a flex spot. And what about the third team? I know we had quite
Yeah.
different thoughts
We
in
did.
terms of the third team. So I'll let you run through your idea first, and then we'll come back to
Yeah,
kind of what
sure.
I thought.
So I went straight to like making a second speed team because I thought that, that definitely the S tier champion that we haven't used yet, which you'd really like to use if possible, was Prince Kaimar. We have Prince Kaimar there. He brings the second best speed aura in the game. So that's pretty powerful. He's awakened as well. That's kind of a nice bonus. But I was thinking you could put in Prince Kaimar, stick him with Lysandra. And again, in terms of that gearing stuff, again, and depending on where your account is, this is a situation where you could actually have Lysandra being the fastest champion on your account. And you could put that Arbiter in something like an immunity set, which is a bit slower. Seeing as Hegemon is kind of covering the speed race there, you could kind of get away with that a bit and maybe surprise an enemy that's not expecting it, or be able to take on teams on offense that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Because Lysandra, she's got the same base speed as Arbiter. The speed aura from Kaimar is the same, so it's much of a muchness there. But the two of those to sort of speed boost, Kaimar puts them to sleep. And then I had a couple of different variations. Probably Gorgrab into Gaius would be a fairly standard one. Gorgrab's going to give you increased attack, a bit more turn meter. And then you could even have a slow Gaius with just super high accuracy and attack, and have him come in, lay the bombs, and those bombs are probably going to kill the enemy. And with Prince Kaimar, when it comes around to that second turn, then Kaimar is going to reset, Lysandra is going to speed boost, Gorgrab's not going to attack either. So they're just going to sleep through their turn, and the bomb's going to go down to one turn, and they're in pretty big trouble at that point. Or then again, another potential variation, you could bring in like Archbishop Pinthroy, someone like that for increased accuracy. You'd lose the increased attack, but if you need to hit through a lot of resistance, it could be okay. Again, another issue would be that speed tuning, though, that because his increased accuracy is an attack as well, he would wake up enemies if he does it after Kaimar. So you'd have to have him like faster than your Prince Kaimar, which is probably going to be quite difficult. But that is something to consider too, that he could go before Kaimar, give Kaimar increased accuracy, give Gaia's increased accuracy. Um, it's just, again, gear wise, it could be kind of difficult. But, it's just a couple of those options depending on the teams that you're attacking. So that was my thought there.
Yeah, and it's definitely a team that would work on offense. And I think it's something that you'll probably end up relying on for certain compositions, particularly if it looks like they're going to be quite slow, probably in Stone Skin, and you don't have an affinity issue for Gaius. Then
Mm.
that Kaimar opening up with the sleep, Gorg increase attack on Gaius, And in fact, your other option there with Pinthroy is you could speed tune him to Gaius. So you could make him like 1
That's
or
true.
2
Yeah,
speed just faster than Gaius and get the increased accuracy just before Gaius goes. It's not going to
very
be
true.
great against Mithrala teams, but for pretty much everything else, you'll have a good option there. And it might be the way you go. Like you said, we haven't used probably the top control champion in the game considered by many in Prince Kaimon. We're on to the third team and we haven't even spoken about him, let alone put him in a team. He's not even entered the conversation. But he could also work in the second team, on offense if you wanted to swap out that Rian and you wanted to put your fast Kaimar in lead and open with the Kaimar into the Duchess to buff yourself and then Mithrala and Ragash. So that, there are a lot of options, particularly on offense. You can tweak these based on the teams you're facing. But my thinking was more on the defensive side. And with Team 3, I was looking at what have we got left that we could create a team that's reasonably tanky and kind of provides enough of a difficulty for the enemy to at least have to think about how to beat us. I think we've got 2 teams there that have a good chance of winning some defensive battles, but we need at least a third team that's going to make it more difficult for an enemy to be comfortable attacking it, particularly if they have to use their best champions against teams 1 and 2. And with that in mind, I was thinking of relying on probably the only other nuker we have that we haven't spoken about, which is Ignatius. You mentioned earlier in the video that we don't have that many nukers. We've really got 2 attack-based and 2 defense-based. And because of Gaius being kind of one-dimensional, we don't really want to use him on the defense. But Ignatius does hit hard and is a defense-based nuker, so we have a better chance of keeping him alive. And then to pair that, I was looking at the only support that we've got left that will kind of really work well with a defense-based nuker, and that's Tatura, in fact, who will give us block debuffs, will give us increased defense. We have a lot of buffs coming from Tatura that are going to help us. Ultimately, we can also get the Veil from Tatura. I know that ultimately, if you want all the buffs, you have to have your Tatura going twice, but even just getting that first set of buffs out pairs really nicely with a defense-based nuker. And then I was also thinking we'd have Uko as a form of sort of buff strip, a bit of a revive, some redundancy there, would also give us increased speed, etc. So pairs quite nicely with the Tatura and Ignatius at making a relatively tanky, difficult team to attack. Also, when teams attack us, they know if they put buffs up, there's a chance that Uko will steal one of them, and that can be a nuisance as well. And then to kind of add some protection there, that ultimate Death Knight that I originally had in Team 2, I thought would work better in Team 3 with the swap with Rian. And there, when Tatura has the Veils up, ultimate Death Knight effectively will protect any single target nuker on Tatura, and also kind of mitigates a little bit of the AoE damage from certain champions, like a Foley with the single hit into the AoE, or Trunda, he can protect the first champion on the double hit, so it would protect Tatura from the double hit. There are a number of ways around, and in terms of lead, in fact, you have options. It doesn't have to be Tatura as the lead. I just wrote it that way, but there are permutations that you could switch it around if you wanted to kind of protect the Uko from that kind of Trunda double hit. You might put Uko as the lead.
Yeah. One nice thing is that with Ultimate Death Knight, if you put him in Stone Skin, right, Trunda's A2, the one that, it hits one target and then it splashes, that does ridiculous damage to Hydra, for example, because in the same way it does ridiculous damage to Hydra, because it does 0 damage to Ultimate Death Knight, and he redirects it to himself with his passive, it just makes her A2 not do anything. So if they've set up their AI in a weird way, that can be really fun in Tag Arena when you just see her completely waste her move. That's super nice. But yeah, I there's stuff. I also think maybe too Hanorach could be a kind of nice option to sub into that team as well, just because the weakness would be that debuffs are going to be quite nasty because you don't have any speed. Like the enemy knows they can go first, so if they do have some nasty debuffs, you could end up in something of a rough spot. Especially if you want to use the team on offense, you could consider, going, oh, I actually need something to cleanse. Hanorach comes in, does give you increased defense, plus cleansing a little bit with her passive. we don't have, unfortunately, that other full cleanser. Having like a cardial or something would be really nice, but we don't have that option. But yeah, she could be a decent sub in as well for one of those champions. Because I think the 13 is definitely a bit weaker. Like there's no like S tier defense here, I think, that I can see at least for the third slot. You've got good options like Brogni as well. You can put in if you got lots of nice dwarf accessories that aren't being used. Stick in a Brogni, especially in like a bolster set, be pretty nice to keep the team alive. But
Yeah,
yeah,
like you say, there are definitely options in the third team in how you might change the composition, because there are kind of we're lacking in terms of the obvious or the S tier ones, and therefore we're kind of trying to be a bit more creative. And the Tuhanarak is definitely a strong option. Is kind of a mini cleanser there, not quite a full cleanse, but definitely cleanses enough to cause a nuisance to the enemy team. Will give us that little bit of extra healing over time that maybe the current team doesn't have. So yeah, definitely that she could be a strong option, particularly on defense. And then, like you said, with the offense, we've got other ways of approaching it with Kaimar, with Lissandra, Gorgorab, etc. So I think there are a number of options there, and hopefully this has at least given the viewer some ideas in how he would proceed with rebuilding and adjusting his tag team. Obviously, I'd say he, it could be a she. But
yeah. But I mean, it's a good point though, because like sometimes this stuff, because it's such a puzzle, right? Tag team is such a puzzle. You've got so many things to consider. I mean, I certainly find with my own account that like you can be running through so many ideas and trying to solve the problems that you can kind of get overwhelmed. It can be very helpful for someone to sit down and be like, "Yo, dude, you've got this absolutely insane like Necret Hegemon team right there. Definitely put those together and have that sort of narrowed down and just focus that in, get them in the gear, and go like, okay, yeah, actually, this is absolutely smashing. This is great." Um, and yeah, being able to work from there, like that sort of stuff can actually be really helpful. Yeah, I'm sure the viewers can let us know as well if they have seen an OP combo that we have missed here. Let us know. Well, maybe there's a Vlad stan, for example, somewhere in the comment section that is like, you got to use Vlad as the nuker. Unlikely, but you never know. It could be there. So yeah.
it's true, and we don't actually know how any of these champions are geared. It could be that Vlad's in his best Savage on the account and actually is the go-to nuker and probably should be used in one of the teams, and maybe is the one being protected by Netcrypt. We don't know. We're looking at it kind of objectively just on the character champion portraits. And like you say, if anyone in the comments could come up with, critique the teams we've created. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What would you do differently? And it'll give a wealth of knowledge for anyone who needs to apply this same kind of structure to their own account. And that's kind of where I created that video that kind of started this collab, in fact, was the roster analysis one, where you're trying to take a whole like page of champions or 2 pages of champions that gets really overwhelming and just cut it down to sort of 20, 25 champions by category type that you could actually then pick from and work from, because it's just too much sometimes if you can't see the wood from the trees if you just have pages and pages of champions to look at. Like you say, it does get overwhelming, so it's about trying to break that down, make the decision process a little bit simpler and a little bit more methodical, and hopefully it'll help everyone watching tweak and optimize their own teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an absolute blast. And again, for the viewers, if you didn't catch the video over on my channel, if you're an earlier game player, hopefully we gave out some, hopefully at least somewhat useful tips over there as well. So yeah, come check that out too. It's a lot of fun as well. So yeah, thank you for doing the collabs. This has been absolutely great.
Yeah, both times. when we recorded it, when we recorded it the first time, and when we recorded it the second time.
Hey. Oh, we should do it a third time just to see.
Actually, I forgot to press record.
Oh no! Actually, imagine.
Well, all that's left to say is thanks for coming on, and thanks for anyone who's actually stayed to the end. This is about 40 minutes in now, which is definitely pushing it on the length of video, but it's just easy to talk, isn't it?
It's fun. Like we got a great roster here as well. Like it's fun. There's so many options. So yeah, there's plenty to talk about, and hopefully it's interesting. I'm sure, like, I would have loved this sort of video. I'll be honest. Like back when I was trying to get into gold in tag, because that's a big time investment. It's a horrible time investment. I think I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning to try to make my way in for the first time. So I'd be happy enough watching a long video. I think if it helped, well, hopefully it did. If it
And,
didn't, then we're sorry.
exactly, and hopefully this
Yeah,
will have helped.
hopefully. Uh,
One thing that would be nice is the person whose account it is. I think you said it was Draki.
I think it's Darky.
Darky,
Yeah, I'll
Darky.
check.
If
Ping him
they
anyway.
could maybe let us know either in the comments or via DM in a couple of weeks' time if they've actually implemented any of these ideas and if they
Yeah.
succeeded or failed miserably, because I'm sure everyone would be interested to know whether we actually know what we're talking about or just waffling.
Indeed.
Right then, thanks for again, and thanks for everyone who has been watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you check out the other video that we did on the kind of earlier game accounts on Nub's channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.